ideas, and I know some people have already suggested some things, but there's stuff on the way, and we can kind of make it like a miniature celebration, which I quite enjoy. So, as a check-in, I'm feeling a lot more positive see how this book contains shocking language in it at times. If you are heavily triggered by familial homophobia, by racism, and a pretty heinous example of racism, especially in sort of the first third of the book, I would advise caution with this novel. This book is, I wouldn't say it is gratuitously cruel, but it does have moments where it's like, whoa, holy shit, and like, I would say some jaw-dropping moments as well. But that being said, if we were going from a scale of like 1 to 10, really simply, I'd give this book a 6. It is very competently written. The characters are very well fleshed out. The characters, Robbie Couch does a fantastic example of constructing these characters without making it obvious. There's no, like, there I was sitting in my favorite unicorn hoodie and watching my favorite show. Like, there's none of that. It's all just, and it's also not overly referencey. I find that some of these high school aged gay romance kind of adjacent books, coming of age books, will find it necessary to like completely define their characters immediately, and like their likes, their dislikes, and like, oh, Sky loves the housewives. There's not much of that. There's just a lot of organic, scene appropriate character building, and I think that it works very, very well. I think this book, that's where this book shines for sure. Plot-wise, it kind of ends up where you would expect it, but also not. It's interesting to me that they kind of blow, Robbie Couch kind of like uncovers the twist, like I said, about a third of the way through the book. And it's really interesting to see the fact that there's 2/3 left. I was like, well, where the hell are they going to take this? And it goes in a very, 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 in a direction that I didn't expect, by sort of revealing the obvious fodder for the twist early. Robbie Couch sets up a really good twist later, and a really heartfelt twist. Nothing like huge mind-blowing, but I think this is a very good book if you have like a queer teen in your life who is into reading and just wants like a quick comfort read that's just very nostalgic for like high school time in general. I think university students would like this as well. But now that we've gotten the sort of spoiler-free review out of the way, spoilers. This book, I'll start with the shocking stuff first. This book contains hate speech towards Sky, the main character, perpetrated by some of his classmates, and then also perpetrated by his own brother. age that all of these characters are, it is in some respect understandable. So, that being said, I don't mind this. I am personally okay with reading it. Take caution. Take caution while reading it if that's the kind of thing that upsets you to a large extent, if that is a trigger to you. This book contains those triggers. So just as a sort of blanket statement, but this book, I think, shows off a character arc and also teaches lessons. I think this book is kind of a fable in a way where there's a lot of high school aged lessons contained in this book that I think some of these books that center around students this age don't tackle. Like I read Jay's Gay Agenda, Gay Agenda, what's the other book? Oh my god, I can't remember what it's called. It's called Out of the Blue. Both by Jason J. No, that's the name of his other book. By Jason June. Sorry. I read those two, and those characters, they go through some stuff for sure, but it's not necessarily the romance is the focus in those books. Same thing with What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli, and Simon Jimenez, I think. No, that's Simon Jimenez's The Spear Cuts Through Water. No, I think it's just Becky Albertalli. I'm gonna go check also. Adam Silvera. So, that book also focuses a lot on the romance, and I can understand where they're coming from on both of those fronts. I absolutely do. The romance is the focus, and they both, like I have sort of said, especially about What If It's Us on this channel, I think they're both very competently done. All three of them are competently done. This book, though, I think is, like I say, a lot more focused on growth through high school and the fact that problems don't quit. This book has some loose threads, I would say, not in a sloppily written way, but in a way that I think correctly shows the fact that even though high school is an ending, the good and the bad can follow. For example, Sky has been kicked out by his mother, and his brother is obviously, we find out, not a very good person. So, rather than wrapping that up with a bow and them accurate depiction of anxiety, a very accurate depiction of worry and feeling like you have to closet yourself even while you're still out, especially in a small town. And I think he is a great character for kids this age to relate to. And it's not as though he has like this huge bombastic personality. He's just kind of there. And I enjoy that about him. Because like I said, this book is meant to teach lessons. It has a fairly extensive sort of like questions for, like if you're reading this as a high school English class, it has 19 questions at the very end as sort of like a continuation. What do you think kind of guide? I think that this is valuable if a teacher wants to read this with groups of students in an English class in grade 10, 11, 12 even. I think it is a very good sort of lesson teaching book that is age appropriate for those kids. Of course it's got swearing. Of course it has like the most mild of sexual themes. Like we're not even, I would like grade 10, 11, 12 students, it's nothing they haven't sought out on their own before, I swear. But I think that this is a very competently done book. If you're not a YA fan, if you're not a sort of high school literature fan, skip this, it's skippable. But if you are a fan of sort of coming of age, if you are a fan of, again, books that can teach a lesson, this is a great book. It is, I think, a fantastic gift for like the queer youth in your life, but make sure that it is safe for you to partake in this book, of course. Make sure that it is not going to invite any negativity on the person you're giving it to you or upon yourself, because it is very openly a gay book. It doesn't look like it on the cover, but the back is very, like, if a parent could read the blurb, they would know what it's about, so be careful with it in case you are in a situation where you feel unsafe. So, that is my review of The Sky Blues. Now I get to review this. I am so excited to review this. I thought I would do a double header because I finished this just yesterday, actually. I started it on the way home from British Columbia, and I probably got, like, if this is the cover, I probably got like this far in like my initial sort of read in the car, about 200 pages or so. I would say probably about this much. And then I couldn't get enough of this book. It melted away so fast. Yesterday I read 200 pages worth of it, I think. Honestly, probably a little bit less than that, but I read a lot of this book. This is Lockland, and it is, of course, by, you can see it here, Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the third book in a trilogy, so I am going to do the spoiler-free Foundry side, if you're a quick reader, you could probably finish the series within a month or two. But these books are fantastic. They are so well written. They're pulpy. They're a little bit, they're not silly, but they don't take themselves too seriously. It's not high fantasy in the we must go get the goblet kind of way. It's very like action oriented and very clever solution oriented. You could also almost call them heist books, which is interesting. This book is the least heisty of all of them, but Foundry Side and Shorefall, very much that. If you love elaborate, intricate planning, if you love everything needing to go right, if you love quick solutions when everything goes wrong, those books, fantastic. And this one as well, for the most part. But if I had to choose a favorite book in the series, I would likely, for what drew me in the first place, the magic and the heist, I would say Shorefall is my favorite. For the action and the suspense and the impossible odds, Locklands immediately. So, this all being said, we are getting to spoilers now. So, this book picks up 8 years after Shorefall ends, and I was originally nervous because I kind of would have wanted to know what happened after the events of Shorefall, after what they call a Shorefall night, when they had to escape the old city, which is called Devon, which is what the villain in this book is called. So, it's not confusing at all, but if you haven't read, it might be slightly. But when the main characters flee on Shorefall night, I would kind of have liked to have known what they did, although where this story picks up, I think it does a very good job of backfilling that. If Robert Jackson Bennett ever wants to write like a series of novellas about adventures that the Givens have over the course of the 8 years between Shorefall and Locklands, I'm game. I take it. I love it. This book also shifts main character. While Foundry Side and Shorefall both really, really focus on Sansia and like how she sort of does her thing and how she survives and essentially one of the most ancient, powerful people in the world, Cressides, waging war against the villain Devon that is, and that has these like floating cities in the sky, and he is like flying around and using the magic system in such a unique way to tear them down, and it's wonderful. It's some of the most compelling action. It's, I think, some of the best action that I've ever read in a book, ever. I would say it's fantastic. This book is, you need to read this trilogy. If you are a fantasy fan, I would say there is no higher priority for you than this series. It is so good. It is so unequivocally amazing. And the other thing that I really like is I enjoy the fact that this book ends everything. Like, it literally culminates in the disappearance of humanity in a good way, not in the bad way that the villain wants to. This book very much ends on a bittersweet note. I think that it is a very good exploration of what happens to the protagonists of these kinds of stories afterwards in a realistic sense. It is not quite an everybody lived happily ever after kind of story. It makes my heart ache a little bit, but then you definitely get this sense that's like, well, it had to happen that way, unfortunately. Where you have Berenice essentially living as the last human that's not connected to the others on Earth. And she finally gets reunited with Sansia in the last couple of lines. And it makes me happy for her. Again, bittersweet, but very sweet. And just a little bitter. But the other part of this book that I think is so amazing is the villain. The villain, Devon, is just like, it is probably the most creative villain that I've ever read, again, in a book that has these cruel ways, and you really get to see that, and like this terrifying power. Whenever I read the word dead lamps in this book, I got like, no, I was like, no, that's not happening. I got legitimately like nervous about them and sickened by how heinous they were, and it's just, I don't know, this book is done so well. It's done so well. I could talk about it again for hours. I think that there is a message to be found within this book. It's very hopeful. I don't think it's the main focus of the story, and that's perfectly alright. That doesn't have to be a message this is the hard part for me, because The Spear Cuts Through Water got easily 10 out of 10 for me. That's probably my book of the year. But I love reading The Spear Cuts Through Water. I absolutely adored reading it. I had more fun reading this book. So I am left in almost a freeze frame of like, how do I rate this one? Because do I think this is a better piece of literature, like a work of art, than The Spear Cuts Through Water? I don't think it's possible to say that, because both books have such different aims. So while this book I think is more fun, more action-packed, more into like the magic of everything and building this complex world and answering all the questions you have, meanwhile The Spear Cuts Through Water is a lot more intimate and individual and explorative of the human condition, and a lot more mythological in a way where there's not like concrete explanations for like everything. So how do I rate this book? Do I give it an 11 because I had more fun? But in my personal opinion, and this is not a blanket statement, I think that The Spear Cuts Through Water is a more poignant work of art. But this is a more